I when I write, I think of my audience first. I care about my audience first. I want them to know where we're at in every point of the story. And I have been accused of being a populist, and I own that. I'm happy to be a populist in terms of I believe in opera as a populist art form, not as an elitist art form.
Alrighty. So thank you for taking time out to speak with me about this body of work, the cook-off.
Thank you for taking the time.
Not a
We
problem. Not a
Yeah.
problem at all. I was trying to find like more resources online and I was just like, oh my gosh, well, I guess I just have a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah.
And I guess my first question is because it's featured with Bon Appetit, what was your inspiration in creating the cook-off?
So the the idea came from Shawn Okpebholo, the composer, and I we're working for this program at Chicago Opera Theater Vanguard, the Vanguard program, Vanguard Initiative, Vanguard Composers Program. Anyway, and we started to shoot around ideas and everything like that, and we both decided we wanted to write a comedy.
Okay.
He told me he's a foodie,
Okay.
um, and I like food and I eat food. I can't call myself a foodie, but I like to cook. And I don't know. I just started thinking like how fun it would be to write a comedy that is set on a competitive TV cooking show. Um, and I sort of started with that premise. Shawn sent me this idea, this story about James Hemings, the Thomas Jefferson chef and
Right.
slave. And I said, well, I can't write that story. I'm not the person to write that story, but I could incorporate that idea into this. And so it really started that way. I mean, for me, once I have a setting and a comic idea,
Hmm.
then the writing starts, it just happens. I imagine the three competitors, um, Ivy, Kendra, and Alvaro, and just started thinking of their own stories and imagining them. And then the character of Beryl, the Scottish uh, food critic who comes in and judges. It was fun. I don't know. I wish I could say that I wanted to write something profound. If you ever start by saying you want to write something profound, you're going to be in trouble. It's true.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Write something true, write something fun, write something that will communicate with the audience. Write a story. The
Right.
profundity will come through in that if you just write your story.
Right. One thing I found very interesting in reading the libretto was the fact that I read
You
it,
read the libretto. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
of course. One thing I really did appreciate about your body of work was how quickly I read through it. Like it actually read like a cooking show. Um, and I'm like, this is really amazing. And so like as I'm reading, I'm like, okay, I gotta get to the next line, the next line, the next line, just to see how it progresses and moves. And it reads very quickly and it's fluid. So how is that communicated through musical elements?
Well, I mean, my job as a librettist is to write text that is going to be sung.
Hmm.
So I hope, after 41 librettos and
Right.
like I've been doing this a long time and have written a lot of works.
Hmm.
I'm always very conscious of how it will sound when it's sung.
Hmm.
And that means making sure the text is not prosaic, kind of getting to the germ of the idea more quickly than you probably would. Realizing that I mean, it's a craft really, but knowing, for example, that you're going to have a pretty strongly pitched emotional moment here, and
Right.
to try to do it with open sounds,
Right.
so that the soprano or the tenor can hit that big note that people love in opera. Um, well, I appreciate the compliment. I guess it's a comedy, so it has to move along very briskly.
Hmm.
And Shawn has done that. I mean, this is his first opera, and it's amazing how quickly he has adapted to the art form.
Wow. Wow. Um, One thing I did really appreciate about the libretto was, I believe it was Kendra's ability to really tell her own story and be like, just because the critic in the beginning was like, well, I'm gonna move past what you have to say, in why she chose to make what she made. What I really did appreciate about that in the end was the resolution overall to where it's like her story is her cooking.
Mhm.
And in the end, it just kind of coalesced together. And it's a very beautiful story based off of true events. And that's really what I really did appreciate about how you wrote the libretto. Um,
Thank you.
and I'm really interested to see how that translates over into the music. I think it's going to be really interesting and fun to see. My next question, since we're talking about like the casting, I've noticed that there's specifications within the casting of this particular show. As this opera gains traction, what are your desires as it pertains to racial equity?
Say this again. I mean, the last part of the sentence.
Oh, what are your desires as it pertains to racial equity?
Oh, wow, that's a great question, and it's a big question. I Yes, the opera is about racial legacy. I mean, it's about owning history and owning who we are. And I was very angry, as I hope you were, and many Americans were, when I saw that Florida was trying to eliminate mentions of slavery in their textbooks.
Mhm.
Same with Texas. A few states have been doing this. I think it's deeply disturbing
Right,
that we would omit those sections of our history. We need to keep facing them. We're not going to go forward if we
right,
don't. And so, if this opera does contribute in some way to that dialogue of like, no, we have to keep telling these stories. We have to keep telling these stories. Then it's a good thing. If I do it while people are laughing, it's even better.
right.
I think Shawn and I it was very interesting writing the character of Kendra because I relied on Shawn to make sure that she was true. I'm not a black woman.
Mhm.
And so I relied on him to give me some advice about that. And my original version of Kendra was far angrier.
Really?
Oh yeah, she was on her soapbox.
Hmm.
And I think Shawn wonderfully kind of said, let's bring it down a little bit.
Hmm.
And what I learned about that is that she still gets to say the things she says, but
Hmm.
she does them with power. And anger is not necessarily power.
Right,
Uh, and so it ended up, I think, being more eloquent because of what Shawn helped me find in that character. We did, I think, two workshops, and it was really helpful in like making just adjustments to Kendra. Um, so in terms of casting, I mean, like we will always cast a Latinx person as Alvaro. We will always cast a black woman as Kendra. Um, Ivy should probably be white. I mean, beyond that, I don't care. I mean, I'm someone who I feel that everyone should be able to play anything at
right,
any time, but we're not there yet. So, and this story is very much about race, about identity and origins and what we get to own in terms of our legacy in this country as people. I mean, I find it really strange that we always call it Southern cooking. When you really look at Southern cooking, it's Black cooking.
Mhm.
It's what Southerners were, white Southerners were making back then was an imitation of European food.
Right.
When we say we're going to get Southern food, it's really Black food. It's
Mhm.
not. And that's an important legacy to our country, and it has to be honored. And it should not be, and its sad origins, which is in slavery,
Mhm.
should never be denied. We have to face up to that. So that's one reason why I loved writing this. Like
Right.
it's a mac and cheese. It's a very small little thing,
Right.
and yet it's kind of important if we connect it with history.
Wonderful. In your response, you had talked about your workshops. Can you delve a little bit deeper into what you learned through those workshops?
Sure, I've done so many workshops of new operas, and it's key to the opera's success because it's when the composer and librettist get to hear singers
Mhm.
who are also our collaborators, a conductor, a stage director. We didn't really have, I mean, Jerry Dye came in and helped us with we have not had a theatrical premiere of the work,
Okay.
so um, just a concert version. So we did have a stage director help us like put it on its feet a little bit, but the conductor is very important in the workshop too because they can identify issues with pacing where
Mhm.
maybe a moment is not clear. And so that's the point of our workshop is that we clarify all of that. And we pacing is an extremely important part of comedy. If something slows down or it sags, the audience isn't it doesn't stay with the story. So I think one of the most important things in a workshop is identifying pacing issues.
Right. And so were there moments within the opera where it moved too slow?
Yeah, I can identify them now. I mean, that's a long
Right.
time ago.
Right.
Yes, where it was moving too slow, where I was just, yes, I think toward the end, there was a moment where I was just like, come on, guys, come on. We've already reached the moment. We've got to push this together. And I think we just made some corrections. It's Shawn has been terrific about like, okay, this is a theater piece. Let's make it work as the theater piece, not he's not precious about his music.
Got you. Got you. I also watched the who did it? I watched Bon Appetit, that was recorded in Des Moines, Iowa.
Uh, mhm.
And so what I liked about that was that they had a person like behind the counter as the performance was happening. So as we're talking about staging and as we're talking about pace, I realized that there were moments where Julia Child actually acknowledged his presence on stage, and like saying, "Oh, well, it must be nice to have a kitchen that cleans itself, right?" Um, and so, are there moments like that within the show to kind of help pacing and just like provide comic relief?
Yes, I mean, like the audience for our show is
Mhm.
the audience in the TV, is the TV audience of
Okay,
the cook-off. So we
gotcha.
have an applause sign, we have a laugh sign
Okay,
that Kenny Kincaid, you'll remember the MC, will point at it when he wants a reaction.
got
And
you.
in fact, there's a moment where the person who's operating the sign sides with Kendra and doesn't give him applause or laughter.
Wonderful.
Um, so yes, it's very much of an immersive experience. We're at the TV show. We want to see people rooting for either Ivy or Alvaro or Kendra. It's sort of like the whole chorus line idea of a competition. We end up going, oh, I want them to get in. I want them to get in.
Right.
I'm less sure about that, you know. And it works. It works in theater to show a competition. Another show, the Putnam Spelling Bee.
Mhm.
Um, that's another show that is based on a competition.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So I'm also a graduate student, and so as I studied music history,
Oh, wow.
um, so opera buffa is a term that's commonly used to describe comic operas. Do you think that this term is appropriate for your body of work, or would you call it or categorize it as something different?
Yeah, I don't, I mean, opera buffa is something I don't think, I think we're writing comedy. Opera buffa, I think is more of an exaggerated style. It's would, if we have a, I mean, it's more of like a sitcom you might see in the 60s, 50s and 60s, where there's a certain comedic style.
Hmm.
Um, I think that the comedy of our operas, when we're lucky enough to have comedy in opera,
Hmm.
should arise from an organic situation.
Right.
Um, and I don't, yeah, I wouldn't, I've written a number of comic works, but I've also written a number of serious works, but I'll always throw in comedy because it connects with the audience. And it's a way for an audience to find humanity in a character.
Right.
Um, yeah, no, I wouldn't call it opera buffa,
Okay. Okay.
just comic opera.
Comic opera.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Um, because opera is often like very serious, and it can be dramatic as well. What expectations or assumptions about opera are you challenging with this body of work?
Um, I love that question. Yes, people's perceptions of opera is something that all composers and librettists writing today in this country have to break down. We're so used to seeing it as this huge art form that doesn't relate to our lives necessarily. Like, I mean, directly related. We can find, of course, connections between almost any story and what's going on in our world. But we're finding ways to direct for us to express the an American experience directly to our audiences. And I we do have to break down those perceptions. I think here, I don't think anyone's ever seen an opera that is based on that is set in a TV televised competitive cooking show.
Right.
So right there, the audiences are going to come in. I hope that we have a number of people who are seeing an audience, have seen an opera for the first time. That would make me really happy. It has happened a lot with my work, with The Revolution of Steve Jobs, with The Shining. All of these works have brought in new audiences. And I would hope that this happens with the cook-off and that they come in and they go, wow, opera's not bad. It's
Right.
not just ridiculous and silly. I'm going to get a season subscription. That would please me a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and I, when I write, I think of my audience first. I care about my audience first. I want them to know where we're at in every point of the story. And I have been accused of being a populist, and I own that. I'm happy to be a populist in terms of I believe in opera as a populist art form, not as an elitist art form.
Okay. I I I like how you phrased that in terms of it being populist because I think the first opera I went to was in New York.
Oh, wow.
And so I mean
Was it at the Met?
it was.
Wow.
So I graduated from Fisk University and I was a
Mhm.
Fisk singer. And we actually had a performance at Carnegie Hall.
Oh,
And
wow.
in our downtime, we got to, explore all that New York City has to offer. And so, like, I went to the Museum of Modern Art, I went to
Hmm.
opera. And there are just certain aspects of it that are very nice. But there are also certain aspects of it that are very daunting because oftentimes that, as you said, that audience, they can often stand on ceremony.
Hmm.
So it's more so as I was watching Bon Appetit, I'm like, this is really funny. It's very engaging. And more importantly, she's actually cooking on stage while she's
Right.
performing. Um, and so I it's breaking down that barrier and those walls that are often found not only in opera but in musical theater, as well as plays. Um, and so it's like now you're breaking down that extra barrier to where you never communicate with the audience. And so it's really getting the audience involved in that performative aspect. Um,
Hmm.
and so I guess this leads me into my next question is with this cooking, uh, with this cooking contest, will there actually be cooking on stage while the performance is happening?
Um, sort of. Let's just say it will look like there's cooking on stage.
Okay.
And I don't know how completely he's going to be able, how much he'll be able to detail that because a lot of times while they're cooking, they're singing. So it's a little bit of a tricky
Mhm.
mix. But I'm sure that I have absolute confidence that John will find a way to make it appear like they're cooking if they're not cooking.
Yeah, because in watching Bon Appetit, that was really the hardest aspect of really putting on that show is because
Yeah.
the director wanted aspects of cooking. So like in Bon Appetit, you see her beating eggs, you see her
Hmm.
but buttering a pan. And so, but then also it's like you still have to keep up with the music. And so with it just being a cooking contest, you're focusing solely on the cooking. So you can take time to really do what you have to do.
The
And
the moments of cooking are also moments of self-reflection
Mhm.
in the opera, and so there's a way to do it where reality is suspended. You can do a gesture of cooking,
Okay,
and the audience will still be with it, if that makes sense. I think the difference between Bon Appetit and this opera is that this opera is not always doesn't always exist in real time.
got you.
Um, they, you know, our three contenders, our three competitors, all go into their personal stories, and
Right.
so that's a moment where you can make a gesture of cooking, where you can mime something, but you don't have to complete it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Um, so I think that for me, being a student of music as well as one who appreciates music, I think that what I'm seeing now within opera is just more so like people are really kind of getting out of that box that has
Mhm.
always been set before them. What was your inspiration to become a librettist?
Um, I used to work in musical theater as a lyricist.
Hmm.
Um, Before that, I was an actor, and not a very good one. And then I worked in musical theater as a lyricist. And then a composer named John Musto approached me with to write my opera, a first opera in 2000.
Wow.
And and I instantly loved it. Like, but I also had a great situation there. I worked with a great composer, a wonderful director, a wonderful company named Wolf Trap, which is in DC. Um, I was very lucky with my first experience. And then it's what I wanted to do. I write opera because I love music, not because I love words.
Right.
Uh, I love I love stories told through music. And uh, so I don't know. I just honestly, with my first opera, I felt that I'd found home.
Wow.
Uh, yeah.
Wow. What's your greatest expectation for the viewer as they watch the cook-off?
Oh, that they're entertained.
Okay.
I have two. One, first, that they're entertained, that they have a good time, and two, that they get the message about racial legacy.
Mm,
Um, that's it. I don't want them to. I want them to go away thinking about that.
right.
But I also want them to go away going, "Oh, that was fun. I really like that." That's. It's very simple. But for me, the word entertainment is not a bad word. So I hope that they're entertained first and receive a message second.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, those are really all of my questions for you.
Great.
I look forward to being able to be in the audience and see it and
Will you
take
be there opening night?
um I think I will be.
Oh,
Uh
good. I will be there, so I'll get to meet you in person.
Absolutely. 1000%. And
Mhm.
thank you so much for being able to
Of course. Thank you for writing about it. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Campbell. I hope you enjoy the rest
So
of.
please call me Mark. Don't call me Mr. Campbell.
I'm
It makes me
sorry.
feel really old.
Well, thank you, Mark. I definitely
Thank
appreciate
you, Andrew. Okay.